obviously fabulous race driver, but there is nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, in world motorsports who is better able to reduce a car to its component parts when he crashes. He does it properly. Okay?
His black and white commentary also underrated, definitely underrated. All right.
Right then, what else have we got here?
I'll grab another one here from, I believe this is from our Reddit friends, and this would be Trewavosaurus, I believe.
His real name is his real name. He doesn't want anybody to know it. His real name is Albert.
Albert, yes. See, Albert Saurus. Yes, I think that's the real name here. Some backstory. I've recently been extremely fortunate with a career change starting last week, exposing me to Grand Prix winners and endurance sports cars on a daily basis where I work.
That's a very odd job.
Well,
that's a really strange job.
I'm glad to hear that in the way that was written, it could have gone badly. Career change where I am constantly having Grand Prix winners and endurance sports cars exposed to me, or exposing themselves to him. So good to hear. To start, I couldn't take my eyes off them, but have since got a little bit, quote, desensitized to them unless there's something new to see. Quite an interesting realization. So, have either of you noticed this due to your high exposure to the sport through different paths, being desensitized to it, whether it be for the cars, drivers, or engineers? Or is there still a kid in a candy shop mentality for most events in every race, or has it worn off over time? And let's go with you. Where do you fall on this?
Well, it references the WC Circuit Safari again, and actually that's a good reference point, because the reason that was so exciting because I'd never done it before. I'd read about it for decades, and I'd never done it before, and it was very exciting indeed to realise that we're going to be able to do that with the WC. Are you desensitized? I'd love to say no, but of course it's your working environment, and actually because you've got to do what you've got to do, in long hours and in come rain come shine, at times you're sometimes not aware there are cars on track. I'm not saying that when I'm in the TV booth. That would be ridiculous.
That'd be silly.
Yeah, but the answer is there are certain things that never get old, ever get old. The access that we get never gets old. I never, ever forget what a privileged position that is. And it's my view that absolutely anybody involved with any race series should make darn sure that they make it their stated aim every day to make sure that they've got the opportunity to give somebody a little bit of access, a little bit of a little bit of excellence in their day. Then that's what they should do. But I think, of course, you do get desensitized to it to a degree. I am one of those people that if I'm not necessarily working back to back, I'd be very happy sitting in a grandstand or sitting trackside and watching and listening to race cars all day long. I've sometimes done that when I'm not working. But then when you're actually there and working and going through that cycle of race reporting, session reporting, gathering comment from the pits, in and out of tech rehearsals for TV, etc., which is my working day, then of course at times you can have cars going out there. It might be a driver doing the lap of his life, and you might just not notice it. So yes, you can get desensitized to it, but only because that is your natural working environment. When you actually step away from that cycle, and particularly when you go down into the paddock or into the garages, I generally don't tend to be in pit lane ever during a track session. I've got no purpose being there, so I don't get in the way. Then the answer there is that gets to be a bit more real, and that's when the part that really appeals to me, which is the people. It is the people that actually the thing that for me nowadays is the particularly special part of it. And there are some people who are just an absolute joy to spend time with. Marshall Pruett is one of them. There was never a dull moment. Never. Yeah, I'm sorry. But there are people you genuinely look forward to spending time with because they have things to say, they have opinions, they have news, they have insights. And that side never gets old, never gets old. There are certain places and certain times when I look forward to being there. The first walk down the pit lane at Le Mans every year is always very special. Going to certain tracks and certain parts of those tracks is always very special. The paddock in the Nürburgring 24 Hours is a very special place. And I've never found that getting old or boring, no matter how utterly shattered you might be after, 22, 23, 30 hours of work. It's still something that wakes you up to go and see it, hear it, smell it. It doesn't get old, but yet inevitably there are elements of it where you are just dog tired, and I think that's like any other job. But you never forget how privileged a position this is, and I think I've said again before on the show that when we've had those moments where some of the youngsters who've come through our doors in the past, that there will inevitably that point where there's been frustration, it's not gone their way. And you sometimes have to take them to one side and say, it could be worse, you could be down a coal mine, is the honest answer. And by the way, if you don't shut up, you will be down a coal mine. But there are those joyous moments, MP, and I'm sure you've had thousands of them. I certainly have, where you suddenly realise. Somebody asked me this question fairly recently, and the answer I gave was, it's this simple. I take pleasure in odd things at times. For me, one of the things that just gives me an inner joy is that Jan Lammers knows who I am. Stephen Kilby said this to me a month or two ago rather, that circumstances offer themselves, that Stephen wanted to write about a charity event where Derek Bell had actually done wing walking. And Stephen asked whether or not we could do a piece to help that fundraising effort. Of course we can. And that meant that Stephen had to contact Derek. Derek called him, and Derek knew he was. Now, it's that's the level at which my insides just turn cartwheels. I just think that's just a fantastic thing. That's privilege as far as I'm concerned. I'd far rather have that privilege than some of the silver spoon nonsense that goes on in other areas of society, because that for me, that's just, it feeds my passion for what makes what I do something I really love to do. And most people in the world are not lucky enough 9 to 5 or however long you guys work out there with your various careers, to do something you're passionate about all day, every day. I'm passionate about what I do all the time. Sometimes I hide it really, really well.
Mr. Albert Soros, I hate to offer this as a response, but because I hate this response more than anything, my answer is yes and no. And maybe I can add a little bit of context so it's less frustrating, at least to me. Yes, there's absolutely a bit of desensitization from my end in comparison maybe to a fan of racing. And that's because since I was, if we really want to go back, since the age of before I could remember, race car drivers have been my father's best friend, one of our family's best friends, who the first person I started working for in pro racing at the age of 15 or 16 in the SCCA Super V series. So pretty much my entire life, a race car driver. My dad was also the engine builder and built his own race cars and whatnot. That's been normal. And then in my mid-teens, working with professional race car drivers and amateurs, good, bad, and everywhere in between, that's been completely normal. And then that evolved into being a engineer and a team manager, as in bigger series and so on. And so I'd say from one end, there's maybe never been a desensitization. Maybe, I guess I'm correcting myself. There's never been that natural hero worship, because that's been, it's been Dad or Rick Sturza, his best friend and business partner, or Mike McHugh, the family friend in Super V, or this guy or that guy. That's just, it's honestly, while they're awesome and amazing people, you'd have to say it's probably no different than the person sitting across from you at the cubicle at wherever you work or in whatever job you do, where you go, oh, well, that's like family, or that's normal to me.
It's a social circle, isn't it? It's a social circle, and that it doesn't belittle the achievements and the ambition and the efforts. It is simply just something that's in your orbit, and it's a strange thing actually to be asked the question and suddenly take a step away from it and think, actually, that's a really good question, but this is the way I feel about it.
And then there's the flip side to that. And this isn't name checking or any of that stuff. I'm just, again, sharing because the question's asked. James Hinchcliffe shot me a text last week wanting to get some insight on something. And I replied with this, and he replied with that, and we went back and forth for a good while about this thing. This driver called and asked a question about whatever. And those things are normal too. And to those who are fans of the sport, many of these folks, if not all of these folks, are heroes, as they should be. They should absolutely be regarded as that. Working with them every day, or just having that kind of long-term familiar relationship, many, fortunately, that are, become tight bonds or personal friends, I actually find myself having to remind myself of how special they are, because that familiarity can sometimes have a negative effect. James Hinchcliffe, who is an amazing person, just empathy like you wouldn't believe, a heart the size of the moon, just truly an excellent person, is also a phenomenal race car driver. And I'll throw Scott Dixon in there. He was one of our guests last week on the Weekend IndyCar, a couple days after he won his 5th IndyCar championship. I have the good fortune to be pretty close with Dix. And sometimes I have to remind myself that in a conversation that is either public or meant for a podcast or an interview, to have to step back from that and be a little bit separate, because otherwise it's just two people talking and not necessarily good content or product that someone might actually want to look at or listen to. And so that's why I say yes and no, because there are situations where you say, God, it feels like I talk to this guy every other day. And so to me, they are that familiar, that close, and so their unique attributes maybe become less extraordinary, but then I do have to step back and go, okay, idiot, whether you know the person well or you don't, they're still pretty darn remarkable, and you need to appreciate that. And then there's the third tier, like you've mentioned, with a Derek Bell. And that's the side that I will say probably of all the input I could give on this, that's the side that will never make sense. I've said this before. When the late Dan Gurney would call, my wife and I could be sitting on the couch, and his name would pop up on my phone, and she knows how much Dan means to me and meant to me. I'd see that light up, and I'd look at her and just kind of raise my hands in kind of that questioning look, like, what in the world is happening? How did this godlike person to me decide, for whatever reason, to call or to send an email or whatever? And it's that Derek Bell type thing, where Derek and I are super friendly. I love the guy. We've spoken hours upon hours, done all kinds of things and stories and podcasts and you name it. And I guarantee you that when I see him in 2 days' time at Rennsport, despite all that familiarity, there's still going to be that is Derek Bell. Oh my God, that is Derek Bell. And at least for me, I have to suppress it a bit, because otherwise it gets hard to do your job. And being professional, that's maybe the thing I've come to learn, Graham. And it's treating yourself like an alien among humans. Mm-hmm. With some of these drivers who many of us will regard as legends, heroes, the greatest of the greats, or, a Norbert Singer from Porsche who I'm going to sit down with for a little while, or you name it. I have to do my best to put myself in the mindset of I am an alien presented in human form